This episode is brought to you by Fox One. Watch all 104 matches of the FIFA World Cup live in 4K for just $19.99 a month with 3 days free. Build your own multi-view, choose up to 3 streams, and follow player spotlights. Stay on top of every moment with live stats, highlights, and instant replays. The FIFA World Cup, streaming live on Fox One. Offers are subject to change. See fox.com for complete terms and conditions.
But you know, happiness can be found even in the darkest of time. If one only remembers to turn on the light.
It takes a great deal of bravery to stand up to your enemies, but a great deal more to stand up to your friends.
Much that lovers never really leaves.
Working hard is important, but there's something that matters, believing in yourself. If they can do it, why not us?
Hey everyone, welcome to Hogwarts, a podcast. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Hogwarts, a podcast. We are covering Quidditch Through the Ages. We're covering chapters 3 through 5. We're actually starting Quidditch and some of the early developments of the sport. Jenn is back with us.
Hey guys.
If we're talking Wizard Sports, we're talking with Jenn. We did have a comment that we wanted to get to before we get into all of the very detailed beginnings of Quidditch. The comment is from Grant, who left the comment on Chamber of Secrets, Chapter 10, The Rogue Bludger, appropriately. And Grant says, Anna, it's da-bee, not do-bee. 2 B's. I don't know why I was so triggered by that. Anywho, I don't think Voldy or Umbridge is more evil than the other, but they're different kinds of evil. Voldy is a murderer with no regard for human life, and Umbridge is a power-hungry madwoman with a need to control everything, and also enjoys suppressing everyone around her by any means necessary, including torture and belittlement. She's a dictator. Yeah, thank you, Grant. So, he gets into a little bit of the who's worse, Voldy or Umbridge argument, and it's not any easy argument, I don't think. If you've been following the podcast for a very long time, you know my 2 cents is also to throw Aunt Marge into this, even though she's only in one chapter for a couple of pages. But word for word, I think Aunt Marge is right up there. Yeah, 2 different kinds of evil. Jen, what do you think on Voldy versus Umbridge?
They're very different types of evil. I do like the addition of Aunt Marge. She's her own third type of evil. And it is just, I think that they're also just frustrating in their own different ways. Obviously, Voldemort is kind of presented on a more grand scale of wanting total domination. Umbridge is a much more insidious kind of evil because she's kind of working within the institutions that are theoretically set up to prevent evil and kind of manipulating that for her own benefit and to be evil. So there's a little bit... One is a lot more shameless and a lot more lawless in his pursuit of power, and Umbridge is much more focused on manipulating the system to make it bend to what she wants.
I think it's been interesting reading these two through the series, and I find myself, when we get the Tom Riddle part of Voldemort, and when he goes through his little monologues or runs as Tom Riddle, I find myself like getting sucked in a little bit of like, ooh, I kind of want to hear more of what Tom Riddle has to say. And that does happen with Voldemort a little bit. Obviously, it's a little bit more threatening and a little bit more aggressive, not as silver-tongued as his former self. But it's still enthralling. Whereas Umbridge, I enjoy reading Umbridge, but because I know it's ominous.
Okay.
Which is weird. I don't get the ominous feeling for Voldy. I get the ominous feeling for Umbridge. Like, every time you see the hem come in, you're like, oh, stuff's about to go down. Like, this is not good. And I don't get that for Voldy. It's a really weird way of reading the two.
Well, so one of the things that I think is interesting, if we're going to, not to go on too much of a side tangent here, but a lot of times with a dictator, they have a cult of personality. And that is what helps them on their rise through the ranks to power. So what I find really interesting about the way that you described reading Tom Riddle and being enthralled and wanting to know more is that Tom Riddle was the cult of personality before he became Voldemort. So we're seeing Voldemort once he has already amassed his following, once he's already in the middle of enacting his murderous, rampage across Britain. He's already established. They're both dictators. It's just how far along one of them is in their path to being a dictator. But I think that what you're describing with Tom Riddle is the cult of personality.
I think a whole thesis can probably be written on just Tom Riddle versus Voldemort. Forget the Voldemort versus Umbridge, which can be its own separate thesis.
Yes.
And it's a testament to the characters that they have that depth to them, and it's a specific testament to the Tom Riddle Voldy side of things, where your main villain, and that's why I think these books are so good, is that your main villain does have that kind of depth, and you can really see how people could have followed him during the Tom Riddle days. Mm-hmm. And then it completely does a 180 switch where they're not so much loving and adoring of him, they're fearful of him. I think in his more adult stages.
Yes.
And I guess some people, like a Bellatrix, might still be loving and adoring. Mm-hmm. But I think they'll say they are, but I think a lot of it is just based out of fear later on.
Yeah.
So
I think that's also something that's important to see in the books, because as you're reading those books and you're when they came out, we were little, so we're growing up with these books, and he does have this following, right? So there is always this question in the back of your mind of, how did he get this following? And then you get to Half-Blood Prince, and you start getting all of these glimpses of Tom Riddle's history and how he influenced, or Slughorn was kind of willing to overlook some of the flags that had popped up because, you see Tom Riddle kind of schmoozing his way about. So I think it is a really good illustration that, that does tend to happen. And, that's how he started to develop this following.
I remember just even the memory of Tom Riddle in the Chamber of Secrets. I was like, just give me more of this monologue. This is a great monologue. And that's a memory of the guy. It's not even the guy. So it's a fascinating character. Thank you, Grant, for the comment. I don't know if you intended for us to go down a whole rabbit hole tangent of the inner dynamics of wizarding dictators, but here we are. So,
but we did, and it was fun.
Yep. Thank you, Grant, for the comment, as always. And if you want to be a part of our conversation and give us something to debate and discuss, you could do so by leaving a comment on any of our social medias. That's Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky. You could leave a comment on YouTube. You can also leave a comment on our episodes on Spotify. And you can find all of our social medias at Hogwarts the Pod. We also have polls on Spotify that you can just go to the episode, scroll down a little bit, and there's a poll there. And we love to see those results. And we will actually be going through a couple of those results toward the end of this Quidditch Through the Ages book, because we'll have a couple of Quidditch-related polls to kind of discuss and debate. So it's always really fun to see what our listeners have to say and what our listeners think. So please leave a comment, let us know what you think, and we will talk about it. Now, we have a lot of Quidditch detail to get through. This is surprisingly dense, but hopefully it's a fun listen as we describe the history of Quidditch, which is the game from Quidditch Marsh. And it all begins with Gertie Kettle in the late 11th century, who kept a diary with the rude beginnings of Quidditch. They have a couple of excerpts from this diary. The first is that she describes a game played on broomsticks and a ball landing on her cabbages, which I can only imagine her then saying, "My cabbages!" If anybody gets that reference, Avatar, yes, hopefully you got it. Anyway, Gertie continues that she ended up hexing the man who ended up coming for the ball, and now that man is playing Quidditch with his knees on, back to front.
Really unpleasant.
That sounds uncomfortable, doesn't it?
Yeah. Sounds a little disproportionate to the situation.
Just a bit. I can recall days of playing baseball in backyards as a kid. And, some of our neighbors were more accommodating than others, and some would get quite offended by the ball landing in their yard, and none of our knees were put on back to front, but still, that is aggressive. The ball obviously is an early form of quaffle, and it was an inflated bladder, which was hard to throw accurately, as you might imagine.
I can see that.
Yeah. The second excerpt was of broomstick idiots playing again. The new ball being thrown to each other as they try to stick it in the trees. She thought this was just pointless rubbish, when in reality it's actually an early form of goal scoring in Quidditch. The next excerpt says, 2 big heavy rocks began flying around trying to knock them off the broomsticks. Unfortunately, while she was watching, that actually did not happen. Her friend Gwynog was over and said that she often plays herself, actually, when she can. And after Gwynog revealed this little detail about herself, Gertie decided, I can't be around these Quidditch players, and went home in disgust. She's so disgusted that her friend played, she left. That's aggressive, too.
She really does not like Quidditch.
She really does not like these broom sports. So obviously the rocks were early bludgers, and it's possibly an evolution of the game Creation. Creation? I'm never going to get this pronunciation right, but I'm hoping that's close enough. The early form of bludgers was introduced by a large Scottish man that Gertie observed playing. Creation, if you're not familiar, was the game where they wore cauldrons attached to their heads and attempted to catch falling rocks in the cauldron, leading to, obviously, a lot of head injuries and just injuries in general.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot of concussions.
It's awful. It sounds like a terrible idea for a sport.
Yes.
But, that's where kind of the early bludgers come from, was from that sport, presumably. So that's kind of an interesting little, early beginnings. They're just starting to throw around a quaffle. A guy that plays a whole other different broom sport comes over and is like, hey, let's throw rocks at each other. Yeah, that sounds fun. Cool. Let's add that in.
The rocks are an interesting addition.
Anyway, a century later, a person named Gudwin Neen wrote to his Norwegian cousin Olaf, yes, the snowman. Neen lived in Yorkshire and demonstrating the spread of the sport. So obviously now we're getting from Britain into Norway. So it's growing.
It's a pretty big gap.
Yeah.
A century later and there's no other writing about it. And then suddenly it's expanded.
Yeah, you don't think it would have expanded so rapidly and so widely without a little bit more documentation on it.
Right.
But here we are. In the letter, Goodwin says that they played Quidditch, spelled a little differently. They played Quidditch against Ilkley, and they needed a replacement catcher because a player got a blooter to the head because another player wasn't quick with their club. New scoring barrels worked actually pretty well with 3 at each end on stilts. So, that's a lot. Obviously, we have Quidditch spelled differently in this letter. There's a catcher and a blooter, which sounds odd to say, but that's what it is. So, obviously, the game has progressed pretty significantly since our last diary entry 100 years previously. The catcher is an old term you might think for keeper, except it's not. It's an old term for chaser. And blooter is pretty obviously bludger. Obviously, the player with the club is now known as a beater. And the goals have changed from just general trees to now they're barrels on stilts. So now we're getting a pretty similar form of Quidditch that we're more familiar with. However, there is still one big thing missing, and that is the snitch, which doesn't appear until the middle of the 13th century. So we're literally going from late 11th century as the beginnings of this. So 1090, roughly.
Right.
Give or take. To about 1250. So 160 years of changes to a sport. Quidditch to our current timeline is unbelievably 936 years. So just a time frame reference of from 1090 to 1250, the kind of changes that can happen in a sport. Then you go 1090 to 2026. I can't imagine. civilizations have risen and fallen.
Yes.
Like,
and Quidditch has persisted.
it's crazy. It's crazy to actually think about the time difference that they're covering here and everything that could have possibly happened. And especially with having you on, Jen, I wanted to, like, you're a big baseball person.
Yes.
The changes that we've seen in Quidditch in just 100 years. Different goalposts, different scoring mechanisms, the addition of whole new positions and fine-tuning to what that even looks like, terminology changes. It's so stark, the changes that happen from its beginnings to this point now, 100 years later. Baseball's remained relatively the same.
Well, I'm wondering if it's kind of I would assume that any changes that are happening in that 160-year span, or in that century span between the documentation that we have for it, everything is probably incremental. I'm assuming that it wasn't just, here's a list of changes that we're all going to implement. So it's probably not as... I could believe that it took them 100 years to go through those changes, because I think changes with sports tend to come fairly slowly, because you have to get used to the idea. People have to slowly buy into it. But, if you look at baseball now versus how baseball was a few years ago before, like, we got ABS this season, which is a huge change to the game. A few years ago, we got the pitch clock changes. So, like, the duration of the game now versus a few years ago is fairly dramatically different, because there's just so much more of an emphasis on keeping things tight, limiting mound visits, like, streamlining the game. So
mainly for a watching audience.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. But it's interesting because it does feel like the base game has not really changed, to your point. But they have made all of these little small incremental changes to improve on each one, so that baseball today, if you watched a game from the late 1800s, would look very different.
I think the biggest changes I can think of with baseball, and we're saying baseball specifically because I think, one, it's maybe the closest to the time span that we're talking about, but also we're super familiar with it, just the two of us specifically. Yes. But two changes that I could think of specifically, obviously the equipment being used, more attention being paid to, like, catcher's equipment specifically, or the gloves. Even the baseball and the bats have been revolutionized to help the athletes do their job better. And then the second bit is the change in athlete has been obviously a topic of great conversation in any sport from, the days of their beginnings to now. And you always like to compare eras of athletes, who's better and whatnot. But, like, you get to the Cy Youngs of the world who have every record imaginable because he always pitched. He always threw. So he has the most wins, which will never be broken. He has the most losses, which also will never be broken. He has the most complete games. Like, he has so many unbeatable records that'll never get broken. Why? Because players nowadays don't throw as much. Now it's once every 5 days, if that. A lot more injuries taking place. So the game has changed a lot, but the basic fundamentals of it haven't. Whereas in this Quidditch, they're adding new players in this 100 years. They're adding completely different scoring mechanisms. It's really interesting to see what changes have been made in the 100 years.
Just for comparison purposes, because we were talking about how to compare a baseball game today with a baseball game from back in the day. I pulled up a list of, like, major rule changes that have occurred over time.
Nice.
So in 1857, games changed from 21 runs to 9 innings.
Oh, okay. First to 21, then to just 9 innings.
Yes. So they shortened it to 9 innings.
That would be amazing. Yeah, that would be
a big. Yeah. In 1883 to 1884, they made a change that overhand pitching became legal. Because I guess prior to that, it was all underhanded, which is also incredibly different. In 1920, the spitball and other foreign substances were banned, which marked the end of the dead ball era, because baseball in the early 1900s was very known for pitcher dominance.
So what you're saying is blatant cheating
Well, I mean,
was
that
then
too.
disallowed.
But, like, yes. But back then, it wasn't blatant cheating. It was just a dead ball era.
Yeah.
In 1969, the pitcher's mound was lowered from 15 to 10 inches, and the strike zone was reduced. So that was another change that was made to increase scoring, because older baseball games were much lower scoring affairs due to either the pitchers doing things like the spitball or having a higher vantage point to pitch.
Yeah, Bob Gibson was a big pitcher that kind of influenced that rule, who was very, very dominant. Mm-hmm. That's a big jump that you just made.
Yes.
So all of the changes that you had said prior to that were in that 100-year-ish window of changing the game, which there were some big game-altering changes, especially in the first 20 years.
Yes. Yeah, it looks as though for the baseball ones that I'm looking at, there were a handful that were made in about the first, in a 40-year time span. Then there's a jump to the spitball ban. And then there's another jump to the early 70s where they did the pitcher's mound change in 1969. And then in 1973 was when the AL introduced the designated hitter.
That was a big change to the game.
It took almost 50 years. It took 49 years to implement the universal DH.
Obviously, as games develop, and hopefully baseball will still be going in 936 more years.
Yeah.
We can all hope, even though we won't be here, but we can all hope.
Yep.
And it'll be interesting to see what that game is at that point. Yeah, I just thought it was interesting to kind of compare some Quidditch to some more modern, regular Muggle sports and see what that comparison kind of is. So yeah, we are getting into some nitpicky, deep dives of Quidditch, and the next bit is going to be the snitch itself. We will take a little break, and we will be back with the arrival of the Golden Snitch. Before we get to our break sound, I'd like to acknowledge our friend Andy, who helps us produce our intros and our break sounds. If you want to hear more of Andy's work and like Formula One racing, check out the Outlap F1 podcast. It's your one-stop shop for Formula One news, insights, race previews, and reviews. You can find them wherever you listen to podcasts, and they even have a YouTube page. So check out Andy and Cody and join them on the Outlap.
Study and play come together on a Windows 11 PC. And for a limited time, college students get the best of both worlds. Get the Unreal College Deal. Everything you need to study and play with select Windows 11 PCs. Eligible students get a year of Microsoft 365 Premium and a year of Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with a custom color Xbox wireless controller. Learn more at windows.com/student offer. While supplies last. Ends June 30th. Terms at aka.ms/collegepc.
All right, so we are back from break, and we are talking about the Golden Snitch. And this is going to be maybe a little surprising to some, but the snitch is actually based off of an actual living magical beast. From the early 1100s, the snidget was hunted, and the sport of snidget hunting was actually pretty popular. Today, snidgets are a protected species. Snidgets were common in Northern Europe, though difficult for muggles to spot due to their aptitude for hiding and great speed. Their small size, remarkable agility, and talent at avoiding predators added prestige for wizards who caught them. And there's like a really interesting illustration of a snidget, and it looks like a ball with wings and a beak.
He's so cute.
Yeah, it looks like it should not be agile at all.
It looks like it shouldn't be able to fly.
It looks like a hummingbird that should have gone extinct like a long time ago.
A hummingbird that's having an allergic reaction.
Yeah, like got stung by like 40 bees at once. Yeah, it looks like it should not be able to fly or move agilely at all, but there we have it. A 12th century tapestry, of all things, reveals that the snidget was often crushed by its captors. So it's not only a small bird, it is a fairly fragile bird.
Oh.
And snidget hunting taking place in daylight led to many broomstick sightings by muggles. However, the Wizard Council was unable to curb the hunting. So what do we think about the idea of a golden snitch being an actual magical beast?
Okay, on the one hand, it kind of makes sense because I always thought that the snitch was a very odd feature of Quidditch. A lot of times when you're watching sports, there's a lot of nuances that are different in between different sports, but they all have the same general flow, basic rules, things like that. At least ball sports tend to. But the snitch was always kind of like a wild card. Mm-hmm. So I get it from from a magical perspective of making it a little bit more difficult and really more so utilizing magic in the game. So I kind of rationalized it away as that. But when you talk about it being based on an actual animal, that makes a lot more sense for how the snitch behaves.
Yeah. Yeah,
at least in my mind.
It does kind of act like a sentient thing.
Flying around, dodging. Yeah, sentient is a good way of putting it, because it always did seem like the snitch would know when it was being followed and would make evasive maneuvers. It wasn't just some random ball enchanted to just behave randomly.
Or like someone controlling it with their wand, like just moving it around the pitch.
Right.
Yeah.
So there was always... So that to me explains a lot more about it. But on the other hand, to hear that it was based on an animal and that they actually used to use the animal in the game just makes me really sad, because it's a cute little burb.
It's a violent thing that you end up crushing it when you capture it.
I don't like that.
It's aggressive. So one might ask themselves, how does snidget hunting become a part of the game of Quidditch exactly? How does one merge into a game that already has a goal-scoring mechanism and a defense with the bludgers and the beaters? So how does snidget hunting become part of that? Well, in 1269, Barbarous Bragg, chief of the Wizards' Council, brought a snidget to a Quidditch match in a cage. And he told the players he would award them 150 galleons, which is, that's a sum. We saw how much 10 galleons meant to just students. It's a lot of money. 150 galleons is a lot of money, even in the 1990s, where our stories takes place.
Yes.
Well, 150 galleons back in the year 1269 is equal to over 1 million gallons today. So that's a lot of money. And it's unclear if Bragg ever actually intended to pay that sum to the player who ended up catching the snidget. But we have an eyewitness account from Madame Modesty Rabnot.
I don't particularly like this guy, both for the randomly chucking money at people for this, but also you're paying someone to kill a bird. I don't like it.
It strikes me as like one of those big game hunters that likes to just like mount different magical beasts. Like, Newt would not like this guy.
Newt would punch him in the face.
Yeah, Newt's commander would not like this individual. But yeah, he kind of strikes me as that kind of individual. Although you can't even really do that with a snidget because you'd end up crushing it on capture. So it's like, you'd have to figure out a different way to capture it, I guess. But Modesty Rabnot does describe the occasion in a letter to her sister. And notes that when the game started, because, once again, 150 galleons were on the line, as soon as the game started and the snidget was released, everyone abandoned their positions to then hunt the snidget. And Modesty ended up attempting to stop the hunt by saying, "This is not sport. We came to watch Quidditch." Bragg ended up throwing the cage of the snidget at her on the pitch. She then ultimately summoned the snidget to her hand, stuffed it in her robes, and ran away as far as she could to then release the snidget in the wild. She thought she would get into a lot of trouble for this, but she was ultimately only fined 10 galleons for the disruption, and she didn't have 10 galleons, because again, that's still a lot of money.
That's a large sum of money.
So she ended up losing her home over this.
I did laugh at the fact that she's relaying all of this to the person that she's writing the letter to, and that it concludes with, "So I'm coming to live with you."
Yeah, she did. She was like this grand story of her heroic nature that ultimately ended in, by the way, I'm coming to live with you because I lost my home.
Yes.
But I can't believe she lost her home over this.
I know.
So a home then is as much or even less than 10 galleons.
Yep.
Which is also a crazy thing to think about.
Yep.
So, yeah, that's a heck of a story from Modesty. Bragg's idea to introduce a snidget to the game of Quidditch changed the sport forever, obviously. The hunter now has the sole task of catching it. Once caught and killed, the game is then over, and the hunter's team is awarded 150 points in memoriam of the 150 galleons on the line. The Snidget is kept on the pitch by repelling spells. It reminds me a little bit of bullfighting, where you're chasing this animal and then it's ultimately confined to, like, a pen of some sort. This is a little different because I suppose you have the crowd themselves doing the repelling spells. Like, if they see the snitch coming to them or leaving the pitch, they're like, nope, and you're staying in. And you know the goal is to kill it, because it literally says once caught and killed. So you're actively killing a beast.
I really don't like that stipulation.
Yeah.
Like, if you're going to catch it and it's not dead, what's the problem?
Yeah, why can't it just be...
Right, why does it have to be killed? That's nuts.
I guess. Unless it's, like, literally, like we were saying, so fragile that there's no way to catch it without killing it.
Yeah.
But still, that's rough. By the middle of the following century, the Snidget numbers dropped so low, the Wizards Council made them a protected species, outlawing killing and their use in Quidditch. And then there was the Modesty Rabnot Snidget Reservation, founded in Somerset.
So I would ballpark it and say, what, it took 60 years maybe? 60, 70 years, something like that, from the introduction of the Snidget to banning the Snidget.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm learning from this is that the wizarding world badly needs, like, PETA.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess that's what Newt was for, I guess.
Newt is PETA.
Newt is PETA, even though Newt came around, like, 700 years later? Give or take?
Oof.
A little under 700 years later? The early 1900s? So, yeah, that's a while before you have a real conservationist come in and label some stuff. But, yeah, it was crazy. So, that is the introduction of where the snitch originated from. You have Bowman Wright of Godric's Hollow, who invented the actual golden snitch used more predominantly now. Bowman was a skilled metal charmer, which is fascinating to me. I want to know about that branch of magic. How do you even get into that? I don't know, but I love it. Like a blacksmith with magic. It sounds so D&D.
It does.
Awesome. Per notes left behind upon his death, he created a walnut-sized ball exactly the weight of a snidget with wings like the small bird, allowing it to change direction with lightning speed, and bewitched it to stay within the boundaries of the pitch, which I feel like were simple things that could have been done a long time ago.
That's the thing. I don't feel like what the snidget was in this was really that difficult to replicate. I don't like it feels like part of the reason it was added was just for the blood, like the blood sport of it.
Only thing I can give it is maybe metal charming as a branch of magic had to be developed
in 60 years
and refined to maybe make those changes.
They went from not having anything to being able to recreate a snitch in 60 years. I feel like they could have done some kind of crude thing. Right. I get what you're saying. I'm mad about the poor snitches.
Yeah. So Bowman ends up finishing the process that started 300 years previously. Quidditch was born. That is crazy that it took 300 years to really get the sport down to what it is today. And then it goes 600 more years without too many real big changes to it. I mean, there are still some like technological things that happen that improve the sport or the quality of the sport.
Yeah.
But, and we'll get to those as we progress through Quidditch through the ages. But it's interesting that generally, for like 600 years, it's just like, yeah, this is it.
Yeah, this is the bare bones of the Quidditch that we know in the Harry Potter series.
So what this is really saying is, like I said from part 1, baseball has another 100-ish years, 120-ish years of change, and then it's good.
Yeah, and then
like,
we're good. Then we just got to tweak it.
Yep. Just deal with the technological stuff that comes through, but otherwise, game's perfect.
What fun additional apparatus are we going to add to baseball to get it to its final iteration?
You know what, actually? So we were thinking about this, and it just popped in my head now. One change to the game, and it's not really to the game. Mm-hmm. It's to the boundaries of the game, I suppose, that have come recently. And it reminds me of, the snitch being confined to a specific area, and it reminds me of rocks being just thrown about haphazardly and how dangerous that can be. But the netting in baseball parks that prevents fans from getting hit with the baseballs as they rocket around at extremely high speeds.
Yes.
And there have been, obviously, far fewer fan injuries because of that. That's been a positive change. So I would imagine some changes like that might be in place, where it's like, how can we make this game a little bit safer? And not only for the fans, but for the players, too. Because if you're following baseball, a lot of injuries. The Tigers lost the best pitcher, one of the best two pitchers in baseball, to an injury. It's like, how do we protect that? I think would probably be changes that have to come.
There are a handful of technological changes that I think would be good to implement. I like the netting. The netting is a good one because that one always used to terrify me when you would sit there without the netting. Because like we've been to baseball games, I've seen people get hit with line drives, and it's
scary.
It's very scary.
Do you remember a change that they tried to implement for pitchers? So line drives back at the pitcher have always been a concern.
Yes.
And will always be a concern because it's very dangerous.
Yes.
But they tried to implement a change. They just didn't know how to do it. Where they're like, we got to maybe protect the pitcher's head in some way, shape, or form. And they tried developing baseball hats that had like a layer of padding around the head.
That.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it didn't gain much popularity because the pitchers themselves hated it.
Okay.
Because it didn't feel comfortable on their heads, and it was a little bulky. It looked odd.
Yeah.
Because it was like a little bulkier, like right above the ear. Mm-hmm. Also, it didn't really do a good job of protecting the head, because there's still a lot of the head that's not protected by padding anyway. So you can still get hit in the jaw, the ear, the forehead. Yeah. Like, there's still a lot of places you can get hit, so it didn't really do anything. But I know there was an implementation that they tried to do with that. It just didn't go well.
Okay.
Because no one had a good answer for it. But I know that was something they had talked about.
That actually sounds pretty reminiscent of like the concussion helmets in football, where it's like they have the like oversized padded helmets now.
That one's a little bit more successful. Still looks kind of funky, but
it looks silly, but I like it because I'm like, yay, player safety. But
I could go into a whole athletic training rant on those, but I will not. Because we still have anti-muggle protections to get to in this episode. So, in the year 1398, Zacharias Mumps set the first actual description of Quidditch and emphasized the need for anti-muggle security. Obviously, the recommendation is for a deserted moorland and a lot of muggle repelling charms, which seems straightforward, obvious.
Seems reasonable.
The Wizards Council outlawed Quidditch within 50 miles of towns in the year 1362. An amendment banning it within 100 miles of a town in 1368. So they amended that very quickly.
Yes. 6 years later, they're like, we need more space.
That would imply it's not working.
Yes.
So in 1419, the decree that Quidditch should not be played anywhere near any place where there is the slightest chance that Muggles can see or will see. That's an interesting way of wording a decree. But there you have it. It's 1419. What do you want? Adequate measures not enforced until International Statute of Wizarding Secrecy of 1692. That's right. We're in Professor Binns' history class with names and dates. That's what we're doing right now.
There will be a test later.
There will be a quiz. That enforcement made every Ministry of Magic responsible for magical sports in their area. So they basically just passed the buck on to regional localities.
I do like how this ties into something that we have already heard of in the Harry Potter series, like in the actual books, where they've talked about Professor Binns' class. They've talked about the International Statute of Wizarding Secrecy. It's been referenced multiple times. I think it's kind of nice that it ties back together of, oh, this was another thing that was addressed in that, what I would imagine is like a massive statute.
Yeah, it must have been a massive... I mean, that had to be a council that lasted weeks, probably, to iron all of this stuff out.
Yeah.
It must have been insane. The Department of Magical Games and Sport then formed in Britain. The Bankery Bangers Scottish team were apparently bad at Quidditch, but great at parties. And in 1814, after a match with the Appleby Arrows, the Bangers allowed Bludgers to zoom into the night and also tried to capture a Hebridean black dragon to use as their mascot.
Dragons are a cool mascot.
It's a fantastic mascot.
Yes. Live ones, maybe not so much.
We will discuss a Hebridean black dragon when we get to Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. Spoiler alert, they're dangerous. They're a problem. So that's, kudos to the Bankery Bangers Scottish team for even attempting it. I don't know how many of them survived that attempt, but, good for them for trying. That being said, the Ministry of Magic apprehended them and disbanded the team. So they're done. So that's just an idea of what the Department of Magical Games and Sport actually do, I suppose, and what they do to teams that flaunt that decision made by the International Statute of Wizarding Secrecy.
Which is good. I think they should make examples of teams that are doing particularly egregious things.
Stunningly, now there are set-aside pitches to play with the proper precautions away from Muggles.
So like modern-day stadiums.
Yeah. So that is all of the uber-detailed facts on Quidditch. At least ancient Quidditch, because we do get a little bit of the modern-day Quidditch going forward in the next chapter, and we'll talk about all of the actual specific equipment and all of that going forward, which will also be a little detailed. But if you stick with us through the end of Quidditch Through the Ages, then we get through all of the Quidditch teams that play. We get through the growth through the worldwide game, which I know Jen and I are very much looking forward to, because that's the real fun stuff to dig into. But hopefully you've enjoyed us talking about snidget hunting and diary entries and all of that kind of fun stuff that is the early beginnings of Quidditch. With that, I think we'll wrap it up and end it here. Again, if you'd like to comment and let us know what you think on the early beginnings of Quidditch, you could do so by leaving a comment on any of our social medias, Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky, YouTube, or you can leave one on Spotify. All of our social media is found at HogwartsAPod. And you can also participate in the polls that are up on our episodes as well. They're up for a very long time, and we love to see those results. With that, we will leave it here, and we will be back soon with another episode. Thanks for listening. Thank you for listening to Hogwarts, a podcast. If you like what you've heard, please click the subscribe button on your preferred podcasting app and follow us on Twitter and Instagram at HogwartsAPod.